So good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the January 14th meeting of the Waco MPO Technical Committee. And what we'll do real quickly is we'll verify members who are present. And Annette is going through that right now. And so we're not going to be actually calling you out right now, but and unfortunately we've got someone texting me, one of the members that's not going to be able to attend. So we'll go ahead and move along. As with all of our technical committee meetings under a virtual platform, any visitors may submit comments that we can read into the record. As of 10 o'clock this morning, we have not received any such comments, so we will move on to the next part of our agenda, which is consideration and action on amending the Transportation Improvement Program. This is the long-awaited amendment that we've been talking about since this past September. And we're not going to go through all the details and all the different permutations that we've considered in the time since then, but we do want to just kind of give you the timeline of how this came to pass. We did adopt the FY 21-24 TIP back in June. 2 months later, we were told that when all 23 MPO TIPs were put together, that at least for Category 2 projects or projects funded with TxDOT Category 2, we were, as a state, significantly out of fiscal constraint. And so we need to go through an exercise of identifying projects to postpone at least sometime beyond the year 2024. Our first effort was done in September. It was a little bit short of what we were asked to consider, and as a result, when we got to October, we were informed that we need to identify another $18 million worth of projects that we needed to postpone. So we came up with a second version of this amendment. Policy Board agreed to that. And in December, we got word that it was okay to move forward with public involvement and to consider action on this amendment for this month. So we're just going to review what's on the table here, what we're asking you to consider as part of this amendment. We have 5 projects that effectively will be postponing. Although for this document, we're actually removing them from this particular document. There are 2 phases of Interstate 35 work associated with Phase 4B, or 4C, I'm sorry. This is mostly frontage road work, but as you'll see, this probably results in some long-term structural changes for that project. There's the Spring Valley Road in Hewitt. That project, FM 2113. One of the overpasses on State Highway 31, the one that's at the FM 2311 interchange, and a project on Highway 6 between McLaughlin Road and effectively FM 185. So what remains are basically 2 projects. One is a State Highway 31 overpass at FM 939. For Category 2 dollars, it's $5 million, but there's another $5 million in Category 4 that's being applied to this. This project remains in fiscal year 21, but the big difference here is that initially we had a mix of federal and state dollars for this project. Now it's 100% state. Then we have the Mall-to-Mall project, which is a section of Highway 6 or West Loop 340. That project now is programmed for fiscal year 22, although the anticipation is that's going to be let for construction in November of this year. It does add $2 million to the cost of this project to expedite the construction, similar to what TxDOT was able to do for the Interstate 35 work that's currently ongoing. And that means we're at a revised cost of $46.5 million for that project. And this totals to $51.5 million, which is slightly above what we were asked to try to aim for. But the word we received from TP&P in Austin is that this is, at least for our MPO, will be close enough. So when we look at the map showing what was in the original tip back in June and look at what's changed, basically every project, highway project, was changed in some way, shape, or form. The only one that remains the same in terms of fiscal year is the Highway 31 FM 939 overpass, which is that green dot almost into Hill County. Now, since many of these projects, as I mentioned, it's not being removed altogether, it's a postponement. And so we have an interest in the preliminary work continuing. That includes environmental reviews, engineering design, utility relocations right away. And so we need to demonstrate that we are committed to these projects being funded at some point once funds are made available. And so we are proposing these projects be added to our Appendix D within the TIP document. So they're not actually part of the TIP, but it's enough of a commitment to continue doing these preliminary phases. Now for Interstate 35, I mentioned that we had two sub-phases of what we were calling Phase 4C. In Appendix D, we're not breaking those out. We're basically just showing the whole project as one project. So that extends from 12th Street all the way down to Loop 340. And then we'd be adding Spring Valley Road, State Highway 31 at FM 2311, and then the State Highway 6 project out towards Spiegelville. And so that means our Appendix D has a lot of projects in it. And probably one of the things that we'll need to look at next year when we consider a brand new TIP document is to assess whether this is really realistic in the short term in terms of what we can actually accomplish in terms of highway projects. So we are at the tail end of a 10-day public comment period. We did receive a comment from the Transportation Planning and Programming Division regarding a couple of other projects that were previously identified. But we have not received any comments from the members of the public from our region as part of this process. And then the policy board will be considering adoption of this amendment next week on January 21st during their regularly scheduled meeting. So what we heard from TP&P is that a little bit of good news out of this, and we actually have two projects that are proceeding to implementation. We have the Elm Avenue Streetscape project, which was let for construction. If you recall, when we adopted this document back in June, we weren't quite sure exactly when that project was going to let, whether it's still going to be fiscal year 20 or fiscal year 21. So the good news is it's under construction. There's no longer a need for that project to be in the TIP. So this action that we're asking you to take today would actually remove this from this document as well. The right-of-way phase for Mall to Mall is in a similar state. It has received federal approval to go ahead, and so there's likewise no need to include this phase of work in the TIP either. The final comment revolves around transportation alternative projects, and there is an option that we could consider as an MPO to group those projects, similar to how we group maintenance projects or landscaping projects or safety projects. However, the more we thought about this as a staff, the more we realized or thought that it's probably best to continue identifying these projects individually, mainly because we do have an active transportation plan that identifies the priorities for bicycle and pedestrian projects within our region. And when you group projects together like this, effectively we're delegating our decision making to TxDOT. And for certain things like seal coats and bridge replacements, that makes a lot of sense. For bicycle and pedestrian projects, we really want to make sure that they are consistent with the priorities that have been identified in our active transportation plan. And so at least at this moment in time, we're recommending not grouping those particular projects within the TIP document. So what we're asking from you today is that there are a couple of options here. The first option is that the technical committee could approve staff recommendations as we've presented them to you. You always have the option of recommending a different set of priorities, and we have several projects that you can mix and match if you so prefer. And then as long as we're staying around $50 million on the highway side, that's the key consideration there. And then you can also consider grouping the transportation alternative program projects. The advantage there is that if there are any changes to those projects, or if there are project awards for something that's ready to go really quickly, it doesn't require any additional action on our part. So at this point, I'll be happy to address any questions that the technical committee may have, and if anyone is willing to entertain a motion.
Hey, Chris, this is Victor. I'm just curious, do we even have enough people to form a quorum on this and vote?
I'm looking at quite a few people on the call now.
Looks like, and did you say we have 8?
Oh no, I'm looking at the folks who've signed in since then. We've got a lot more than that now.
Well, in terms of technical committee members, is that what you're saying in it?
So wait, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm looking at upwards of 12 to 13 now.
Okay.
Yeah, some of which are staff though, and not on technical committee.
I'm counting tech committee members.
Okay.
Nine.
Okay, we're going to need to verify. Okay, we're going to need to verify then who are we counting as a tech committee member and who we're not.
Well, we can call roll then, Annette. Should we do that, or verify who we have on our roll call?
Do you want me to do that?
Well, who have you identified as on the call? Annette?
We have Anthony Beach, Amy Berlarley Highland, Chief Tom Dixon, Victor Gable, Bridget Gonzalez, Serena Stevenson, Debbie Tahiri, Clayton Zaka, Barbara's here, Barbara Maley.
Okay. Yeah, I would say that, yeah, I went back through and yeah, it looks like, we've got a problem here. So it looks like we do not have a sufficient number to consider a recommendation. So there will be no recommendation moving forward to the policy board. Okay.
Should we make some phone calls, try to get some people on here?
Well, I've seen several emails from folks saying that they had a conflict or that something has come up. I don't know that that's necessarily going to help here, but what we'll need to do is a technical committee recommendation is not required for policy board action. And so we'll just have to mention that because of a lack of sufficient participation, we are not able to provide a recommendation to the policy board. But with that said, I can still answer any questions that the policy board may, or I mean that the technical committee may have on this.
I get paid.
Okay. So we'll move on to pavement and bridge targets. And similarly, we won't be able to take action on this today, but we do want to at least run through this and see if you have any questions on these. And just to mention here, we caught this a little late. We did notice on the agenda it referred to targets for 2024. That's incorrect. We are looking at a target year of 2022. And we've made sure that that's correct for the policy board agenda. So as a reminder, pavement and bridge condition is one of the, or a couple of the metrics that both state DOTs and MPOs are required to track for facilities on the national highway system. We're looking at, for the interstate system, percent of that system that's in good and poor condition, and then the remainder of the interstate system, also what percent is in good and poor condition. And then for bridges, we're not separating them out here. It's just what percent of and in this case, it's bridge deck that's in good condition, what percent is in poor condition for the entire national highway system. So that NHS system is a pretty important distinction here. It does include the interstate system, but it also includes other freeways. It includes principal arterials and represents 11% of our regional lane miles, but 60% of our regional travel. So these are definitely the most important highway facilities within our region. But as a note, the MPO does track condition for all arterial and collector roadways within our region through the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, because we have an interest in the condition of all facilities within our region, not just the subset that happens to be the national highway system. And at least for right now, this is what the national highway system looks like within our region. Of course, we have only the one interstate highway, that being I35, but the remaining roads that are identified in red are the remainder of the national highway system. And you may recall that we recommended some changes to that system a couple of months ago. Those proposed changes have been forwarded to the national or to the Federal Highway Administration and are being considered at this time. So these targets were originally adopted back in 2018, initially by TxDOT, and then the MPO at some later chose to support most of those targets. There was one that we identified as something for our that needed to be a bit different for our region. I'll identify that when we get to that specific one. One of the things that the federal program allows for is a mid-course correction, though, if trends appear to be going a little bit differently than was being anticipated. And for TxDOT, looking statewide at pavement condition, both for pavement condition and bridge condition, they realized that, yes, things are going to be a little bit, or anticipated to be a little bit different in 2022 than the trend lines are indicating. And so TxDOT took advantage of that opportunity and did make some adjustments to their initial targets. And since we chose to support those targets by and large, that triggers a requirement for us to at least assess whether we are still willing to support those targets or do we want to consider something different? And so that's why we're here today. For pavement condition, the reason we separate out the interstate system from the rest of the national highway system is quite simply the interstate is held to a higher standard. And so we need to assess whether it is meeting that higher standard or not. We're going to run through these really quickly, but there are specific definitions for what constitutes a good pavement versus what constitutes a poor pavement. For all pavements, the International Roughness Index is part of that equation. And then for the interstate system, we're also looking at the rutting condition, cracking percentage, and joint faulting. And of course, it depends on what kind of pavement surface we're looking at, whether it's asphalt or concrete, as far as exactly what it is you're looking for. TxDOT identifies roadways with a IRI of less than 94 as being good. Greater than 170 is considered poor. So the higher the number, the rougher the roadway. It's important to note that rough roads don't necessarily mean that the pavement is structurally problematic. For rutting, a depth of less than 0.2 inches is good. Greater than 0.4 inches is considered poor. And of course, this is just for asphalt pavements. And then also on asphalt pavements, cracking is another consideration here. And I'm just going to run through these because you can read these for yourself about what constitutes good or poor. But if you have questions, be happy to answer those. And then, of course, for jointed concrete pavements, which we don't have a whole lot left within this region, that's another category here. And I don't think we have any of the jointed concrete on the interstate within our region remaining. And I think what we've got for the interstate here is this continuously reinforced concrete pavement. Okay, let's look at where we stand right now. So for 2020, percent good, 76% of the interstate is considered good within the Waco region. Off of the interstate, 55.55% of that part of the NHS system is considered good. Those are both better than what the statewide averages are. And are better than what the 2022 targets, both the previous target and the adjusted target are, that have been adopted by TxDOT. Now that non-interstate percent good, that's the one that we had a different target that we decided was more appropriate for our region, mainly because at the time, that portion of the NHS system was significantly less, or there was significantly less good lane miles than what we had statewide. That's changed. Now we've flipped that equation. I imagine it's probably because of some work that's taken place both on the part of TxDOT and the city of Waco. And so there's one of the things we're recommending is that there's really no need to have a separate standalone target for our region, that we can support the state targets on this particular metric now. In terms of percent poor, the good news is there are no poor pavements on the interstate system within McLennan County. Even on a statewide level, it's fairly small. And then for the non-interstate NHS, it's right at 7% of the region, but that's half of what we're seeing on the statewide level. And so our recommendation is that we should support all of TxDOT's targets for pavement condition.
Hey, Chris, it's Chelsea. Annette and I took a peek at the bylaws, and I'm pretty sure our quorum requirements only apply to policy board. Technical committee recommends, right? Doesn't adopt, so we might be okay.
So that's correct, and it's not specific, but I think we've kind of had an informal feeling that if we had less than 10 people, that's probably less than what we feel comfortable asking for an action from the tech committee on.
Okay, we might be getting more participants. I think Christy's joining us and Jeff will also be joining us. So we might circle back in a couple minutes.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and run through the performance targets, and we'll assess where we are in terms of membership at that point, and see if we can circle back around to the TIP amendment at that time. So for bridge performance targets, here there's not a different standard for the interstate system, so we don't separate out that phase of or that portion of the national highway system here. But what we're looking at is bridge deck area. So we're not just looking at individual bridges, and the whole idea here is that if you've got a really long bridge or a really wide bridge, that represents a much more significant bridge, and so we want to make sure that those remain in good condition. And if they're in poor condition, then that may make those a higher priority in terms of addressing its condition state. There are three elements that are part of the scoring system for determining whether a bridge is considered in good condition or poor condition. A score of 7 or greater in any one of them is considered good. It's a 10-point system. A score of 4 or less is considered poor. Good bridges have all three elements: the superstructure, the substructure, and the bridge deck, which is not confusing here. All elements have a score of 7 or better to be considered good. To be considered poor, all you need is one of them to have a score less than 4, and it doesn't matter what the condition score of the other two elements are. All right, when we look at the percent of good deck area, yes, we are still a little bit lower than the state average when we look at 2020 condition. The reason why we're still recommending that we support the state's targets is because we have a lot of work currently taking place on the interstate system that is addressing a lot of bridges that are in that fair category. Either they're being replaced outright, or there's work being done to improve their condition, or they're going away in some cases, as I think some of the bridges around the Business 77 interchange were in that category, and they're not coming back. And so when we factored all that in, there should be a very significant increase in the percent of bridge deck area being classified as good once we get to the year 2022. The good news is there are no bridges, or NHS bridges at least, within our region that are defined as poor. And so that's definitely significantly better than the statewide total. And so, and here we mentioned the I35 Reconstruction and how we're anticipating that the work that's going on the interstate right now is going to dramatically change that percentage of good deck area there. And so our recommendation is that we're going, or is to support the state targets for bridge condition here as well. And then just to give you a summary of what we're looking at here, the adjusted 4-year target is what we're now aiming for, not just on a statewide level, but it's our recommendation for our region as well. Now, this translates for us into a consideration of what is the mix of projects within our transportation plan and TIP, and we want to make sure that that mix of projects is helping us maintain at least the percent of these pavements and bridges at this that are considered good or poor and that we don't want to slip below these numbers. So similar to everything else we do a public comment, or we have a public process to solicit comment on these targets. We're at the tail end of that process, similar to the TIP amendment. We have not received any formal comments as a result of this process, and likewise, we will be presenting this to the policy board a week from today for their consideration. And so the option that the tech committee could have, if we have enough people now on the call, is that we have, you can either support all of TxDOT's targets, which is the staff recommendation, or we can consider region-specific targets for one or multiple of these metrics if you feel that's more appropriate. So, Annette, do we have a new total for membership participating?
So can Victor have the floor for just 1 second?
Sure.
Great.
I'm going to appoint Britton as proxy for Christie, and I believe what I've been being told is that'll get us up to the right number to make a vote.
Okay.
That will. That is correct.
Chris, this is Jeff Jackson. I'm here too now.
Oh, good. Thank you. All right. So what we'll do is see if you have any questions, see if the tech committee has any questions on pavement and bridge targets. And since we now have enough people on the call, we can entertain a motion, and then we'll recircle back to the TIP amendment once we're finished with this.
Chris, I make a motion that we accept the proposed changes to the targets.
I'll
All right.
second it, Chris.
Okay, I have a motion from Amy and a second from Serena. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. So if everyone can unmute yourself and signify approval by saying aye.
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 And anyone opposed by saying nay. All right, that motion stands approved unanimously. And so now we will circle back around to the TIP amendment. And let me navigate over to there. And for those of you who joined in just now, basically we presented a number of staff recommendations. Really what it is we're looking at the mall-to-mall project with a little extra cost, and the State Highway 31 at FM 939 overpass, but being 100% state funds instead of federal funds, and that everything else on the highway side would be postponed until after 2024. And then there are 2 phases of work that have already been either let for construction or received federal approval to acquire right-of-way. So that is the Elm Avenue Streetscape project, and then the mall-to-mall right-of-way phase. And so those would be removed from the TIP as well, as they no longer need to be identified at this time.
And a reminder to the technical committee that that's consistent with the meeting packet that was provided to you last week.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Esmeralda, AKA Chelsea. So we'll reopen for any questions that the technical committee may have and a consideration of a motion at this time.
If nobody has any objections, I'll make a move to make a motion as stated in the packet.
Okay, I have a motion.
I'll second.
And Tom Dixon, second. Thank you. Is there any discussion on that motion? Hearing none, I will call for the vote. If you can unmute yourself and vote for approval by saying aye.
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 And those opposed by saying nay. Hearing none, that motion will stand approved by unanimous vote. All right, so thank you. And we apologize for a little bit of that confusion there, but apparently we have a few folks who normally would be with us that either had a conflict or there are apparently issues, which I'm sure you understand, with COVID-19 and contact tracing. And so, unfortunately, that's kind of the world we live in right now. So what we're going to do now is shift gears and hand this over to Clayton Zaka, who's going to give us an update on current phases of construction.
Hey, Chris, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right. So on the 4B project, contractors completed just over $224 million of work through December. We're still projecting on-time finish, which right now with substantial completion date is looking like late 2022, early 23. Jumping into construction on the southbound frontage road, the bulk of the work is still at the south end of the job. We are actually going to pour 8th Street this week. So we should hopefully have the 8th Street intersection opened up early next week on the southbound frontage road. 9th Street, we're still kind of fighting some utilities, unfortunately, there. So it may be a little while longer to get it opened up. But we're hopeful that by the end of January, early part of February, 9th Street's opened up. At 2nd and 4th, we've got some pretty major utility work going on still. We've been coordinating with the city. We're looking to get those utilities tied in the first week of February. So once that's done, drainage and roadway work will be right behind it. So we're probably looking at a 4 to 6 week time frame after utilities are tied in to get 2nd and 4th Street reopened. Down that end of the project, the entrance ramp just south of 4th Street remains closed. We anticipate it reopening with our traffic switch in the late February, early March timeframe. Northbound frontage road, we've put a lot of concrete pavement down on the ground. We actually opened up a section of frontage road from 84 up to Loop 340 right before the holidays. Really, our big sections remaining are from the south end of the project up to University Parks, and then in the Forest Street area. You should see a lot of subgrade work and hot mix paving going down in January, February, and then late February into March, concrete pavement and those sections of frontage road opened up. You can go to the next slide. On the main lanes, obviously the big push is the southbound direction. We have completed nearly every bridge on the southbound side with the exception of Business 77, which should be placed next week, actually. We've got the exit ramp 277 that will be poured later in January as well. There's a lot of concrete pavement going down. We're actually going to look at an increased number of paving crews starting next week. The contractor will be shifting to a 24-hour operation. So be a lot of concrete pavement hitting the ground between the middle of January into March. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we anticipate switching traffic in late February, early March, and that would be from the Business 77 area down to the south end of the project, with the entire southbound direction being opened up a few months after that. Just a quick note, we do have a traffic switch actually tonight to open up the permanent exit to US 84 southbound. So traffic will be directed on a new pavement and the new exit ramp there, and that'll allow the contractor to complete that the main lane pavement tie-ins on either side of the ramp. I guess with that, I will open it up. Are there any questions or comments about the project? All right.
Yep, doesn't sound like they are. Clayton, as always, thank you. We really do appreciate the updates.
And we should have updated drone photos hopefully later this month. So we'll have a good snapshot of where we are before the traffic switch and our northbound construction starts up.
Great. All right, thank you. So that leads us to the director's report. We do have our next tech committee meeting scheduled for February 4th, which is just around the corner. We have several more targets that we're going, or performance targets that we need to consider. There are two that we do on an annual basis, safety targets, and then transit asset condition targets. There are some important changes that we need to be discussing about safety targets. And so you'll probably want to stay tuned for that. And then we have travel time reliability targets that we adopted 2 years ago. Similar to pavement and bridge, they're 4-year targets. Similar to pavement and bridge, we can consider a mid-course correction. And TTI has provided some analysis to assist us with that. And yes, we probably want to consider a mid-course correction on what we did back in 2018. And then, of course, we'll continue with our TxDOT construction update. And sounds like we're going to have some new photos, which will be interesting to look at and see what's changed. And just as a reminder, we will be meeting virtual for the time being, and we'll let you know if there's any change to that. So that is our meeting for today. And as always, if there is something that you'd like to have discussed in front of the technical committee, please let us know at least 3 days in advance of the meeting, and we'll be sure to get that on the agenda.